Hi everyone, welcome to this June edition of the Tableau Prep user group. It's great to see people dialing in from all over. This event is specifically for the Americas and APAC, and that's what we're seeing in the chat. I'm seeing that Sydney is pretty cold right now. I'm sure it's not quite as cold as New York or other places in their winter, but sounds like you're suffering over there. My name's Jack Parry. If you're new to the user group, I set up this user group over 2 years ago now, which has flown by. So I'll be leading this session today. I was going to be joined by some of the other co-leads, Jar and Jared, but they couldn't actually make it. And we've got some great presentations for you today by Fraser and Govind. A couple of things before we really dive into it. There is an opportunity for questions during this session. It's great to see people using the chat, but if you have specific questions for the speakers when they're presenting, could you please put those in the Q&A? The chat is great for general chit chat throughout the sessions, if you're enjoying it, whatever, but if you have some questions, please put those in the Q&A. We will allow the speakers to answer some of those live after their presentations. We will try to get through most of them, whether that's answering live by the speaker or through me or Fraser or Govind answering those during the other people's presentations. The session is being recorded, so if you have to drop off for any reason or you want to recommend this to someone afterwards, it will be posted on Tableau's YouTube channel tomorrow. So we can send out the link following the session to all of you once that goes live. If you've not been to a Tableau Prep user group before, this is the list of leaders. It's actually not even the full list. So this was started by me a couple of years ago. I did that by myself for quite a long time, but then felt I needed some more hands on board. So I brought on Jenny Martin, who runs the Prepping Data Community Challenge. So if anyone's a Prepping Data fan out there, you're probably well aware of Jenny. Jenny's a colleague of mine from the Information Lab. We have Jar, who joined us earlier this year, and we have Jared, who is our latest user group leader. This would have been Jared's first user group as one of the leads, but he couldn't make it this afternoon, unfortunately, or this morning, depending on where you are. We do also have Beth Careys, who is based down in Melbourne, Australia, but she's currently on maternity leave and will be returning to the user group panel a little later on in the year. Before we dive into the speakers, we do have a suggestion for you as attendees of the user group. So I co-lead the New York City user group as well, and a couple of other user groups out there have created Slack workspaces for their user group to grow that community, allow for some networking. But with Prep specific, we had some ideas that it would give you direct communication with the leaders if you wanted to speak or you had suggestions for the user group or if you wanted to get involved. Something that we have spoken about with the Tableau Prep product team is that it would give them visibility of what people are coming across in the tool, whether there's any bugs, common features that users might want to see in the product. So it would give a space for communications with them. Prepping Data, the team there would love a space to communicate with people participating in that challenge. People can share solutions. Again, it's sort of a line of communication to Jenny, Tom, and Carl. We could have space for troubleshooting in there. We'd like to sort of build a community around this. So if you have issues with your prep flows, someone might be able to help you. And then of course we could provide updates on the product. It of course wouldn't be a huge commitment. It's more something that we were trialing. So I just wanted to put a poll out there to everyone to see if there would be any interest in this. Of course, there's no obligation to join, but it's just an opportunity for if this would be something that you'd like to see. So I'm just going to launch this poll for a moment or so and just get some feelings as to where people are at. So hopefully you should be able to vote in that. Give it a couple more seconds if there are people that are still wanting to vote. Otherwise, we'll close that down. Give you 10 more seconds if you're really contemplating your decision here. Cool. Well, that's great. It seems like there is quite a big interest in that. So we will work as a team on getting that organized. And as you know, or if you're a regular to the user group, we do have newsletters that go out every 2 months, sort of in between when we don't have user groups. So we'll get that organized and communicated to you once that's ready. But we've got 2 really great speakers today. We've got Fraser, who is a principal at Onware, and we've got Govind, who works at UC Davis. Fraser is going to present first. So Fraser, if you would like to come up and take the stage from me, it would be great to hear your presentation.
Sounds cool. There we go. Took a few clicks there to get that right. All right. Thanks very much, Jack. Looking forward to speaking with everyone today. The kind of topic that I want to kind of focus on is the idea of mergers and acquisitions. A lot of what we do is kind of centered around these kind of use cases. So it's a one that that's near and dear to me that I can talk about. I have a software background, and so like coming from like computing science, and I kind of started using Tableau in around about 8 years ago. Let's say around 8 years ago, and it was really like a light bulb moment for me coming on above my head, because like I had been building these databases for years and years, and I could like see all the data that we were putting in these databases. So I kind of have that software background and kind of moved over to working with Tableau, and now I do a lot of data architecture type stuff with Prep as part of my daily job. And my COVID hobby was playing with vintage Sony electronics. So I took a picture of that there. I've discovered Japanese auction sites, and I've wasted lots and lots of money on them. The other thing really like to do in spare time is golfing with bears. So this is from being from Canada and up north in near the mountains, at least. That's a fun thing for us. And then last one I just want to mention, that's my first Tableau conference with Chewbacca there. So I was at Tableau conference this year. This is my Tableau conference t-shirt underneath there. So anyway, company is called Onware. We do a lot of work with architecture, engineering, construction, and kind of related industries. So a lot of working with Prep, working with Tableau. We also do a lot of custom software and connecting with APIs. We've done some custom portals working with the Tableau API. So a lot of focus. I say like we love Prep. This is the wall just outside the hallway from where I am. So about 12 feet long, 8 feet tall. That's our favorite Prep flow. That's how much we love Prep. We had a new wall. We decided to fill it up with our flows. So that's a bit of background where I come from and my experience. So I want to talk about 2 use cases today. So this is the first use case. It's a US-based company that's kind of been in like a growth mode and acquiring other related companies. So they kind of have 2 main systems that each kind of comprise about 40% of their business. And then they have some legacy systems, but they kind of run in parallel. Like they're taking new orders, they're processing customer orders on a daily basis, but they're completely siloed. They're completely different systems. And so what the operations team and the executive team want to see is, the overall view of their business. So they have people that run manual reports in different areas, but they don't have that picture of their entire business. And that's where Tableau Prep has come in. So we've kind of built some flows that take all of their invoicing data from their various systems, all of their order processing systems, and combine it together. And so before I kind of dive into the flow, I just wanted to talk about some general tips. So the one thing is, start with a custom query if possible. If you're connecting to like a SQL server, it's often nice to make the SQL server do the work and do a custom query. In the case of these flows where we have 5 different source systems and there's overlap between the systems because there were legacy systems, we like to create a calculated field called source. And it's basically just the name of the source system. But the reason for doing that is really more for us to help debug our flows than anything else, because we have data coming like on, same customers, but different systems. We want to be able to see which system that we're working with. The other thing that we do is we really try to have all of our data sources on the Tableau server. So what we'll do is a lot of create a data source and publish it to the server, set up the refreshes, and then consume those data sources in prep and publish them back to the server. We have done things where we connect to like SQL servers and other data sources directly and consume those in prep, but kind of find that the performance is not quite as good. You're spending more time waiting for things to calculate and preview. So if everything can be on the Tableau server, it tends to work a little bit better. 2 more tips. One of them is save renaming for the end. One of the goals is to have a nice clean data source, but if you're renaming kind of throughout where it's not really necessary, it's kind of creates maybe more work than you need. And if your prep flows grow really, really big, with lots and lots of steps in them, they can actually have like worse performance. So try not to rename unless it's really necessary, and kind of just do it at the end before you output back to the server. And then one last general tip here, using linked tasks on the Tableau server if you have a bunch of flows is really nice, because you don't have to wait for one to finish, and the scheduling is a little bit easier. The other nice thing about using linked tasks is that it will send a success email. So one of the things that we have to do is like monitor our flows for customers to basically make sure everything and they're getting new data. So having that success email come every day when the flows run is really nice. So this is the flow. This is like one of our big order flows where we consolidate orders. And so I'm just going to highlight some of the different things that we're doing in this flow. And then I'm going to do a demo that has kind of 2 examples of some of the things that I think are maybe the most interesting as part of this flow. So the first part on the left there is the inputs. So we have 5 order processing systems. 3 of them are in daily use. 2 of them are legacy systems that we're not refreshing anymore. They've transitioned to the other 3. But we do have that full picture kind of going back to day 1 of all the orders that the company and the companies that they've purchased have ever taken, the complete picture of what they've done with their various customers. So the second piece here, it's important for some of the metrics, whether the order was made or completed on a holiday. So we have a central list of holidays that we join into the flow so we can see that. We do consistent business unit naming. So we pick the source that has basically our business unit names, and we bring that into the flow. So, if they decide to change the name of one of their operating units and things like that, then it'll just get reflected automatically in the flows, and we don't have to go and rename a bunch of stuff. Layering and states. So, some of the systems have Texas, some of the systems have TX, some of the systems have a mix. So what we do is actually do some cleanup steps in here and actually output both the abbreviation and the full state name in our output. The little tiny green line there that call out is pointing at is actually the output of another flow. So we have a whole complete flow that looks at the revenue and the invoices, and then we aggregate it up and bring it into here onto the order, so we can see the whole revenue picture that relates to the order. So that used to be part of this flow, and it got too big and too complex, so we moved it off to another flow. That's where the linked tasks are really useful, is to you can have that task run first, and then when it completes, have it run the order processing flow. The next one is a days open calculation. So again, for their looking at metrics and things, they want to know how many days an order has been open for, looking at the aging and things. So this is excluding weekends, on hold days, and holidays off the orders. Order expenses is another thing that we layer on top of here. This is another query that gets aggregated up to the order level. Sales team mappings. We're going to get into this a little bit more detailed when I do my my demo, but this is adding things like who's the account manager. They use this information for calculating commissions for the salespeople, because like I said, this is the combined view of the whole company, so it's the most reliable data for even doing like the commissions that they pay to the salespeople. And then the last chunk is historical statistics. So there's actually an output. Let me see if I can highlight this here. There's a little output right there where the mouse pointer is. And then these pieces on the top and the bottom are just doing some historical statistics. And the reason that that's part of our flow, even though we could do it in Tableau Desktop, it actually was like too many calculated fields. It was too complicated. So it was better performance and easier to do in the prep flow rather than doing it in Tableau Desktop. These are the two things that I'm going to look at in my demo. One is, sounds simple, is joining data. I'm going to go through and show you how we tend to like, this is our kind of recommended best practice for joining data. So, before you join, there's some steps that we normally do. And then after join, I'm going to go through and show you exactly what it is. The next one that we're going to look at is mapping files. So, basically, sometimes it's hard to avoid Excel. As much as possible, we want to use, SQL servers and real databases for our data. But, people have mapping files all over the place, and we have to deal with it. So if you're bringing Excel into Tableau, I call it a safety valve, but I'm going to show you how to set that up. The challenge is that if you're doing an Excel data source that one or multiple people can enter data onto, you could have data entry errors, and you don't want that to wreck your flow. So a good example, because we're doing a flow that shows like orders in process. If we had a customer that's mapped twice inside of our Excel file, and then we join that onto our orders, it'll actually duplicate the number of orders. So instead of having 100 outstanding orders, now we have 200 outstanding orders. So that's really bad, because people think, oh, look at all these orders we got in, we're doing great, and then it's actually no, it was just a mapping error. So I'm going to show you an approach for kind of avoiding that from causing problems. And more, let's say, modern approach maybe is bringing in Power Automate. So we actually have set up some workflows where basically people edit their Excel files in in the cloud, on the web, using OneDrive and SharePoint, and then we take that with Power Automate, get it into a SQL server, and then access the SQL server in Tableau. This looks like a lot more moving parts to debug, but the real nice advantage is that it can fail gracefully. So if they do put errors into the Excel, we can kind of find that in the Power Automate flow and prevent that from causing errors in our dashboard. So there's ways around it. I just, the caution is be careful when you're working with Excel, because people will put errors into your Excel and it could mess up your flow. I just noticed a question in here. How long does it take to run the flow, and how do you debug? So we have the flows kind of run all night, every night. So we start at midnight extracting all the data from the source systems, and it takes a few hours to kind of do all the queries to get all the inputs in place. And then we start kicking off the flows. And so the three kind of main flows, the one for invoice, the one for orders, and then we do one for the aging of the orders, take about 5 hours in total to run. So we kind of have the linked tasks kind of kick off, and they do that. So basically kind of starting at midnight, and then about 6:30 in the morning is when everything kind of finishes. So we do kind of check that on a daily basis to make sure that it's running properly, because essentially what happens is at 8 a.m. in the morning, a lot of the executive team at the client will actually bring up their executive dashboard so they can see, how orders are tracking week to date, up to the minute kind of thing. So, so for my demo here, I'm just going to close the PowerPoint for a minute so I can see what I'm doing. the first one that I'm going to do is just a piece of that flow. So I'm actually going to start and kind of build it here. It's actually this one. It's this one here. So I have, I'm just going to, kind of quickly build this out, and hopefully it won't take too long. The first one here is, which one is this? Okay, so this is my orders. This is my orders data source. So this is my big list of orders. I kind of just took a chunk of it and cleaned it up and made it anonymous a little bit. What I need to do is take this the orders data, and I want to layer into it the revenue information. So this is all of the invoices that kind of go with their invoicing system. So one of the things that I want to do first is I'm actually going to take the invoicing data, and I'm going to just gonna double check here what I did before. So one of the neat tips here, like I'd say, is clean up your data sources as much as possible. If you have like a bunch of columns on here that you're not using, that you don't need, you can make a cleanup step in prep to get those out. But actually, I can be much more fancier than that. I can actually just I'm just going to do a little filter first. So I'm going to do a clean step here. I know one of the things on these orders, whether they're this is an invoice, whether it's canceled or not. So I'm just going to keep only the ones that are not canceled. So I'll just do a filter on there. And then the next one I'm going to do is I'm just going to aggregate. So the neat thing with this aggregate step is that only the columns that are part of your aggregation are going to move forward. So rather than actually creating a bunch of cleanup steps to delete all the columns that I don't need, I really only need the order key. Let's drag that in. And then I want to aggregate the amount. So if I just do that, all these other columns will just drop off. So I don't have to do like a cleanup step to get rid of that. So that's really handy. That actually saves me a ton of time now, because when I first started using prep, I'd always delete the columns ahead of time and then go into the aggregation. And one day I figured I didn't need to do that anymore. So I mentioned joining was one of my things. So before I do my join, I'm going to be joining on this order key with my orders. And I want to have a nice clean data set. It's going to be a left join because some of the orders may or may not have payments associated with them. So one of the things that we always do kind of going into a join is we actually mark the field that we're going to be that we're joining on. It's going to be redundant. So we don't need that anymore kind of going forward. So I always like to mark it with like delete or some way. So I know that that's the extra order key that I can discard. So when I do my join now, it actually makes it a lot easier too to figure out which field, because it's marked with delete there. And that's just going to go onto order key. Oh, do that the other way. Sorry, I want to join this up to there. Come on. There we go. So it's going to be a left join. So on here, it's going to be order key, and I'm going to have my order key delete there. And then kind of coming out of my join now, I put another clean step. So this is like my pre-join, rename the fields for the join, do my join, and then I do a clean step afterwards. So I can just do a quick search for delete, and I can get rid of that extra order key column. So that just helps to keep the flow nice and clean and maintain just the fields that you need. So that's got my orders. I've added in like the revenue that comes with those orders. And now I need to do my mapping. So here's my mapping file down below here. This has got basically the class, the firm ID. So this kind of helps to identify the customer that the order belongs to. And then the CAM here is the account manager. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a clean, what am I going to do first? We'll keep this quick. I'm just going to go straight to my duplicate check. So this I'm going to aggregate, and it's basically my duplicate check. So I'm going to take the class ID and the firm ID, because that's what I need to identify who the salesperson is. And then I'm going to bring in my salesperson's ID. So I've got these 3 fields that I'm interested in from my Excel mapping file. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to bring in a number of rows here. And you can actually see already that I've got a problem. So if I was looking at the flow, I can see right away, I've got a bunch that have 1, but then I've got some 2s and I've got some 7s. So these are actually my duplicates. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a clean step here. And this is going to be to remove my duplicates. So from here, I'm just going to keep only the ones that are mapped once. And that's the one that I'm going to join onto my orders in a second. And then this is the safety valve that I talked about. So I'm going to create another clean step here. And in this clean step, I'm going to actually exclude the ones that are mapped once to keep only the duplicates around. And then on this one, I'm going to actually output this to my Tableau server as a data source. So, and we'll do that in a second. I'll show you what it looks like. So I'm going to join this now that it's kind of been cleaned up onto my, let me create a clean step here. Again, I'm going to be joining, I don't need the number of rows anymore because I've just filtered to 1. I'm going to be joining on class ID. So I'm going to mark that one. Firm ID, same thing. Gonna mark that one. And then when I do my join, you can see it already kind of started figuring that out. So firm ID is the other one I want to match on. And I'm going to do that as a left join. And why is it complaining? I know why it's complaining. Because that should be a string. Now it's happy. So now I have my joined orders with my salespeople, same kind of thing. I can just search for delete and I can get rid of those extra columns. Oops, just remove those. And then, so this one here, before I go any further, I forgot to mention, when you're working with these big files, so this is quite a large, there's millions of orders in here, there's like 8 million orders. Tableau Prep by default is actually going to use a sample of your data. So if you see like here it says sampled, this is not the full data in the preview. That's something to be careful of if you're using the preview and you're expecting it to see like all the results. So lots of times, I'll switch that to say use all data rather than doing a sample. And then when I'm looking at previews, it's showing me all the data in the preview rather than just a sample there. But either way, I wanted to show this one here. So I'm just going to preview this step in desktop here just to show you what it looks like. So what we've done is, like this can be output to your Tableau server. And then you can create a very quick and dirty dashboard here. Oops, a second. So what we've done is we've created a dashboard like this. And basically, these are our duplicates. So we actually set up like data alerts that the Tableau server will send out to tell us that we have duplicates in our mapping file and we can go and fix those. So it has happened a couple times and this has really helped to be able to quickly find those and prevent over counting for numbers of orders. So that's just a little piece of the flow. But that's kind of the one of the things that we did. So I'm going to keep plowing along here. The second use case that I had is same kind of idea. It's a US-based company. They started by acquiring 2 Canadian companies. So I had to deal with foreign exchange and then acquired a third US-based company and then switched everything over to a new ERP. So we actually had 5 different ERPs that we were pulling data from, lots of mapping. Each company is using a different chart of accounts. They have different products, they have different customers, but once they kind of integrated, they were sharing all those. One of the challenges that the leadership and the sales teams really wanted to see was like, what's the historical story of a customer? Like what have they bought in the past? How long have they been a customer for? And when all of these acquisitions happened and all the system switching, we had to have a way to be able to go back and to be able to see that full story for the customer. So this resulted in a couple of different prep flows being built. One of them was a sales reporting one. It was maybe more of a straightforward. The biggest thing was just, you know, researching the different ERPs and figuring out how they presented data and creating queries that match, and then just unioning that together. The more interesting problem is the financial reporting. So we built a bunch of flows to do financial reporting and budgeting, that kind of thing. And one of the challenges we had with the budgets were they had accounts that have budgets, but they didn't have any transactions. And then they had accounts that had transactions, but no budgets. So we did this idea of scaffolding where we went out to the systems. We got a list of all the possible accounts, all the possible months, to get, you know, a list of possibilities, and then we joined on the transactions and we joined on all the budgets. So it really didn't matter if they budgeted an account that didn't have any transactions, or they, you know, had activity on one that didn't have a budget. We actually had it all roll up on the financial statements, and it all worked very nicely. So this is, again, this is the overview of the flow that did that. So at the very beginning, we went out and had queries that went to get all of our chart of accounts, our list of branches for each of the companies. We brought that together in a union. We added on top of that some product groupings, because this customer is selling products. They want to just report on the groupings. Brought on a list of dates. So this is like a date file, just the months. And then we left join on the transactions. So this was a summary of the transactions by month. And then we brought the budgets on as well. And then, you know, I'll put that back to the server. So this was it. The green line here and the orange line, there's a lot of work that went into preparing that data. Those are all like separate flows that got that where it is. But what I wanted to look at was this piece here. One of the things that keep coming up with the customer was like they wanted to be able to do statistics. So, you know, what was the last 12 months number for this account? You know, what was the prior year number for this account? Those kind of things. And you can do that with a lot of calculated fields in your Tableau workbooks, but you can also do that in the prep flow. So like I'm going to use the last 12 months as my example. And so it's basically, you could use a table calculation, but then you have to have all the data in your table. You could write a bunch of calculated fields to do it. I think it's kind of neat that you can just put it in the flow and then it's available there for all your users. So I'm going to show you how we did that. So we'll zip back over here. And I'm going to have to like look over there a couple times. That's my cheat sheet. I have it open and prep in another window, but I'll show you how this is done. This is my extract here with my transactions. So you can kind of see I've got my budget amounts in US dollars, Canadian dollars. Entry amounts are the actual transactions that are taking place. It's done by month. We've got account numbers and company numbers. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create kind of two branches here. So this is like a really neat thing that you could do in prep, where you can kind of create all these different little branches. So the bottom branch here, this is what's going to have my transactions and budgets. So that's going to kind of just follow along the bottom. And then in the top here, I'm going to do my last 12 months calculation. So the way that I do that is I'm actually going to split the flow again. So I'm going to do another clean step here. I'm going to go up above. So the piece that we want to do, I'm actually on this branch here, I'm only going to be looking at the last 12 months US. So I'm going to take out some fields. I'm going to take out the budgets. Oh, and this is another tip. Actually, I'll point this out. One of the things prep will let you do is select a bunch of columns and remove them all at once, which is kind of neat. The problem is if you had like 100 columns and you select 100 and remove them all at once, and then something happens to one of those columns, like it disappears from your flow because you removed it because you didn't really need it, this step would error out, and you'd have to go and figure out which column had the error. So one of the things that I like to do is actually just put separate steps in. So when I'm removing columns, it seems like a little bit more tedious, but when you're reworking and working with the flow later on, it actually saves time. So I'd actually, instead of selecting all three and hitting delete, I would delete all three separately. So I get rid of the ones that I don't need anymore. And then the next step I do is I'm going to create a header. So down here is where I'll create my header. And what I'm going to do in this step is I'm just going to create a new calculated field. So this is 12 months before the date. So I have a column that has my date in it, and I'm just going to calculate what's 12 months before that date. And you'll see why in a few seconds here. So basically, for each month, so if it's January 1st, 2021 is the date, it's going to 12 months before that is going to be January 1st, 2020. So I have the date and 12 months before. I'm going to change this to a date, not a date time. And in my header here, I actually don't need the entry amount, so I'm going to remove that. So this is just my headers. Basically, this is a list of all my accounts, all the companies, and a date and 12 months before that date. And then what I'm going to do in the top piece in green there is I'm actually just going to rename all the columns. So these are the ones that I'm going to keep the entry amount around, but I'm going to get rid of these ones. So I'm just going to rename them quickly. And then I'm going to join this back on to my header. And this has to be an inner join. And what we join on is basically the company number. So the company number has to match, and my account number has to match. And then we'll use basically have the date is going to be greater than or equal to this date. And then the 12 months before date is less than or equal to the date. So that is going to get me all the transactions in the previous 12 months unioned back in with the header. And then I'll just do a little cleanup here to get my deletes. So I can remove all of those. And then I need to aggregate, because when I did this, I blew up my row count a little bit. So I'm just going to aggregate here. Just double check. I just need the date and the account number, the company number, and then the amount there. So now this entry amount is the sum of the last 12 months of activity in that account, in each of the accounts. So I'm just going to rename this last 12 months. And then I'm going to rename these guys because I'm going to get rid of them. Rename this guy. I can share this afterwards. It's kind of it takes a little bit to kind of figure out what I'm actually doing here. Maybe join this one back onto here. So now I'm just going to join this back onto my header that has, remember this one here has my transactions and my budget amounts. And then I've just used those 7 steps to calculate the last 12 months. So I can do like a left join here and account number to account number, company number to company number, and then date to date. And again, do a clean step after my join to get rid of those extra columns. So you get a nice clean data set at the end. And remove that. And so now basically my data set kind of has my budget amounts, my entry amounts, and I've got my last 12 months amount there as well. So that was kind of, that all looks good. And then I can run that. This is one of the really neat things with prep as well is, it's fast, right? So like if I take that and I run that now, doing that calculation for the last 12 months, it's really not adding a lot of time onto my prep flow for how long it runs, but it saves a lot of computation later on for Tableau Desktop, having to do table calculations or do a bunch of calculated fields to be able to get that result back out. So that's kind of the end result. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I had to cover. I don't know how long I went over on time. Jack can tell me, but if you want to, see more about what we've done, I'd be happy to talk about it more. You can reach out on LinkedIn. I'll put my contact information in the chat as well, so you can see that. But like I said at the very beginning, we kind of love prep, and I think we're probably really pushing it to the limit sometimes in terms of some of the stuff that we're doing and the size of these flows. But it's really like helped to save like the first customer, that first use case. Basically, that was kind of day one with prep that we started using that, and the product has grown, much better over the 3 years or so since we started doing it on that project. So it's been a really good journey.
Thank you so much, Fraser. That was a really great presentation. You're getting lots of nice comments in the chat, but
great.
I mean, at parts that may as well have been a tipping session as well. I picked up a couple of things there, and I actually don't think I've seen a prep flow that large before. So yeah, really good. I really like that renaming with the joins and deleting out fields. That's a really nice one to pick up. And it was good to call out sampling as well, because I think often people don't realize that prep does that by default, and
yeah,
suddenly worry where their data is, why it's missing.
And even if you preview in desktop, you just get the sample if you have sampling turned on, and that like threw me too for a couple times. I've been like, oh yeah, I forgot to turn off sampling.
Yeah, exactly. We do have a couple of questions in the Q&A, which I've sort of saved for now. So
Okay.
one of which, I guess you can answer these together really. So someone's asked whether you can schedule prep to sort of run workflows daily like you do with extracts. And someone has also asked, what's your primary scheduling tool, orchestrator or Windows scheduler, or what?
So yeah, we have we always use the data management add-on so that we can schedule, everything in Tableau Online. So, we'll have all of our extracts kind of scheduled, and we kind of use the tools in Tableau to know how long the extracts take. And then after all of those kind of, we've given time for them to complete, that's when we start running all the prep flows. And some of the prep flows we could run in parallel, but, it only runs one at a time. So we kind of built it was a bit of a nightmare, but we built a schedule that runs throughout the night to do it all, and it works reasonably well. We just keep an eye on it just to make sure things don't get missed. But that's kind of the data management add-on is like super great. When we first started, we actually used Windows Scheduler and scheduled like prep flows to run on a computer, and it was just, we had no monitoring and no visibility to what it was doing. So we kind of cut that out fairly quickly, because we need to be able to log onto the Tableau server and see whether it was successful or not.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we use the data management add-on here at the Information Lab as well. But John has called out, and I know you mentioned it briefly just there, Fraser, if you don't have the data management add-on, so this is a paid server add-on that you can buy from Tableau, which includes Tableau Prep Conductor, which allows you to schedule those prep flows. You can do this using Windows Scheduler, but as Fraser mentioned, you have far less visibility over what might be going wrong with any flow.
It's more like the Windows Scheduler, we've used it a couple times as like a proof of concept to be able to demonstrate the value to the client, and then then we show them data management add-on and what you get with that. The other great thing with data management add-on that maybe it's not as valuable to like viewers, but for server administrators, the Lineage tab is the most amazing thing ever, because it lets you see exactly where the columns are being used. And so when you're working with a flows and you want to rename a column, or you want to change a column in your flow, you can see the exact impact that's going to have across your Tableau deployment. So the Lineage tab is super useful for that, and that's just part of the data management.
Yeah, I'd echo that, and we've got Nick in the chat also agreeing there. Patrick's got a comment about being reminded of high school computer lab with your Mac behind you there.
Yeah.
We were discussing before whether that would get a mention.
Yeah, we said before it was crashing on me. I actually got it to. It's a G4 processor, not Intel. I actually, there's a trick. If you have one sitting in your office, you can actually make those load Tableau dashboards. And I did have like dashboards that cycle on the screen on there, but it was crashing earlier, so I turned it off.
We have a few more. Eugene has said here, saving a data source to a server, this is only an extract, right? It's not possible for a live connection. I'm not sure if that's talking about using a published data source as your connection in here, or just publishing data to the server in general.
So today I'm just using like an extract that I have saved onto my computer. But a lot of what I normally do is I'll connect to the Tableau server. So I'll use the published data sources that were published to the server previously, and bring those into my prep flows at the beginning. And then at the end, I'll send it back to the server as a published data source. So it's kind of taking the data kind of out and back into the Tableau server when it's done. But because we run it on the Tableau server, it's not such a big round trip. The other thing that we've also leveraged more recently is this database table, where you can actually like output your prep flow back to a SQL server. So we have one client where we actually take their flows and we send them back out to a SQL server so that they can use their nice clean data sets in other applications, not just Tableau.
Nice. And then finally from Nick, wouldn't it make sense to break up the workflow into smaller parts for faster performance and debugging? So sort of daisy chaining the workflows. What's the reasoning behind going for the big workflow?
Just because it's all like we do have, if I go back to the picture here, can I go back to this guy? Let me see here. So at the like I mentioned quickly, this green piece is another flow that's quite large as well. So that's doing all the invoice consolidation and aggregating it. So that's a different flow. We have another flow here that does this step. So that was like the hold days. So we have calculations like it's coming out of the 5 systems, aggregating it together, and then we bring it in here. We did find that this was getting too big. So we did like split some of that stuff up onto other flows. It was more just managing the outputs and knowing that we want these outputs to be available at the same time. So those are in the same flow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so John's comment, this flow was actually even bigger.
Yes. Yeah, it was. And we've kind of found like this, we actually take the output from this one and we run another flow that takes about 2 hours to run on the server. Like we have all the orders in here. We have the start date and the end date of the orders, but we want to be able to say like, on January 15th, how many orders were open? So we actually do the same kind of thing as like we did it the last 12 months, the same kind of technique to recreate that backlog and show for any given day how many orders were open. And that flow has about 200 million rows in the output. And it takes 2 hours to run. We find, and it doesn't go back to the beginning of time. I think we had it going back 48 months or 36 months. But we basically found that one was growing too big for prep. So the output and what the server allowed was just too much. So we had to cut down the time window. But the crazy thing is like 200 million rows, you can plot that in Tableau desktop and it's like that. It's just like, it's instant. Like it comes up, like it works so well. It's crazy. So that's why I'm a big fan, right?
Great.
Yeah.
The only other comment is Samuel asking for your contact details, but I'm sure you can provide that.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. As I say, that was a great presentation. So thank you for joining us today. Govind, if you want
so much.
Take control and we can kick things off for you.
Sure thing. Thanks for joining here. Let me pull it up. So I actually want to start here with the end product, which I'm not going to go over how to actually do this because this is in Tableau Desktop and This is Tableau Prep. But by the way, my name is Govind Acharya. I am at UC Davis in the Institutional Research Office there. And I'll give you my contact info at the end. And this is the end product. And so the question had arisen about what types of, where are some of the times that a classroom is not being used. Now a Gantt chart, which you can see here, actually does explain some of it, right? It does explain where some of the gaps are. But what was missing was from the building point of view. So this is from the course's point of view. And so I'm going to talk about utilization in that respect, which is developing a way to really show the gaps of classroom utilization. And at first you might think, oh, this is a very narrow use case, but actually virtually anything that has a fixed supply. So the classic in economics, I'm an economist by training, is about parking utilization. And so what is what are the optimal times, or when is parking the most full? And you can use it for that. You can use it for hotels, any type of occupancy type of thing where you have a fixed supply. You could actually use this type of design that I'm going to show you. Like I said, a Gantt chart may work for some aspects, but what the decision makers really needed to know was what is the state of our classrooms? Is it really as full as people are saying? And so this is the ultimate thing. And this is actually showing the result of a lot of work that we did over the years that actually led to a new classroom building. So there was actually some real world questions answered here by this particular example. And so I'm going to go through it with Tableau Prep. Let me see if I can smoothly do this without. There we go. So I have zoomed it. This is, I was just thinking that I think I have a couple of flows that are about the size of a Fraser's, but this is not one of them because this is sort of pre-digested for the presentation in a way. And so let me actually just make sure here that I am showing the right. There we go. Okay. And so what you're going to need is actually, here's where you're actually going to need an Excel spreadsheet of some sort. And the reason is that you're going to need this Excel spreadsheet in order to develop what's called a time skeleton. And so this right here is the complete flow. And what I'm going to talk about here is I'm going to talk specifically about this particular section. I'm going to talk about some of the calculations that are needed here. And then I'm going to talk about what happens over here. So the first thing you're going to need is a file, and it's a very simple file that you could just cook up on your own. Is a file that shows shows each of the hours in a day. And I'll explain why. It seems kind of weird. Like, why do you just need 1 through 24 and then adding a 0 there and then just a field of 1 that I'm calling a temp join? Depending on how detailed your analysis is going to be, you may need a year term, which actually I do have here, and minutes. And I'm not going to talk about the minutes or the year term. I'm going to specifically just concentrate on the hours just to illustrate the usage of this. Let's go to back to the flow here. And so let me expand so that you can see the file. So when I click on the hours here, so I bring in the hours, and this is from that very file. And you could see that in the flow, that in fact, this is the file. Well, of course, it's going to go nice and slow, even though it's just a small file. And you can see here that it is indeed 1 through 24, 0 through 24, actually, with a temp join of 1. Now I'm going to bring in a list of buildings. And so this list of buildings is or list of classrooms rather, every possible room at this university, or every hotel room, or every hospital bed, or whatever, every parking space, into a different file. Now this particular file has it also by academic year. So if another building comes online or another building is taken off, that will be adjusted there. And so what we have here is, let's make sure I'm using the default sample. I'm going to create a very complex calculated field, which I'm going to call cross join, and just a 1. Of course, you don't have to call cross join, but the key is that there's a field called 1. Now, what's going to happen here is that I'm going to do an inner join on those. And so the reason to do this inner join is to really get every single hour into this classroom file. And so and the reason is that not only do I want to see those time periods where the course is actually happening, but I want to see where it's not happening. That's actually almost more important for this is where the particular classroom is vacant. So it's a very simple join here. I guess I should have called it a temp join, but nonetheless, you can see that even with just the sampling going on, you can see that just the number of rows just expand astronomically, because it's like 0 through 24 classroom 1, 0 through 24, so like 24 times thousands of different classrooms. And again, it's so that you could see when a classroom is not being used. Okay. So that's pretty straightforward, even though it does really expand the data set, and you're going to see it's going to, well, ultimately it'll expand the data set even more dramatically, because we're going to add every single course that's being taught in a given quarter. The UC system is largely a quarter system, so we have 3 terms. And so each term is in there, and there are thousands of classes, and it gets attached to a particular room at a particular hour. Now, how do we do that? So we have the course schedule here, which I'm not going to talk too much about, but suffice it to say, it's going to have the actual building, room, and also the time. Now, the time is interesting. Time is very interesting, right? And it's the challenge is that how do you ensure that you're getting it in the right format? Because sometimes you have issues with times such as, let's say, 11:15 to 12:10, right? So you're actually in effect using the 11 o'clock and the 12 o'clock. Now, what I'm not showing here is the minutes, and you could actually get even more precise, but for this exercise, we're just thinking of it as 11 and 12. And so that means that classroom is being used in those hours. And the way you do that is actually you create these fields. And what I'm calling them is start hour and end hour. So all it is simply using a calculated field. It would be the same formula in Tableau Desktop, of course, that is simply parsing out the hour of both the start and the end. And I'll get to why in a minute. But here you can see that the result of the calculated field for each of those is just picking out that hour in an actual time. Now I'm keeping this particular discussions to this time skeleton concept, but what I actually do is further, and you could talk to me about this later if you'd like, is that I actually split these up into 5 days so that a Monday, Wednesday, Friday course shows up 3 times in a row instead of across. So it's just restacking them. And so when we get to here, this is actually where the cool thing happened. Let me just see if nice to see all the IR people in here. Now what we're going to do here is ultimately we're going to get this gigantic data set which has every hour. So it's actually almost trivial. So we'll see 2 a.m. and then is up here, right? But so we don't want those necessarily. What we want is we want a narrower set. And so I'm going to go to the join here. Click on it. And this is going to require some explanation here. So definitely feel free to ask for clarifications. These are, this first 3 are pretty straightforward. These are just connecting the room. Can is just a code that's used for the building, and then the room and the academic year. So those are almost irrelevant. Those are like the normal connections there. Now these are the interesting ones. So this is what's called, actually I always get confused about the terminology here, but this is a specific type of join. And what I love about Tableau Prep is that I don't have to spend all this time like debugging why I did not get the specific SQL correct in the by actually just coding it directly in here, so I can save a lot of time in doing this visually. But hopefully I don't get this confused. So it is, the goal is that we want to return the values that are, we want to make sure we keep all of the classroom slots regardless of whether or not there's a class in there, right? And so it's going to result in just a ton, or at least hopefully a ton of nulls, right? But that's okay. We actually want to be able to see some of those times, but we don't want to include like junk times, like 2 a.m., right? Those are not as essential, because for us, it could be that there are use cases where those are more appropriate. I would say, like, yeah. So I could think of stuff, but this is not necessary. So a classroom is considered to be in that room. And again, I'm simplifying it using just hours and hours and minutes. A room is considered, or a course is considered to be in a classroom if the start hour is less than or equal to the hour slot of the room, and the end hour is greater than or equal to the room slot hour. So that's why you have this join here. Actually, annotate here. Just wanted to highlight here. So this is the section that I'm referring to here. Oh, I actually crossed it out instead of annotating it there, but you can see that there. So that is the key there. And let me just repeat it. A course is considered in that room if their start hour is less than or equal to the particular hour slot, and the end hour is greater than or equal to that particular room slot. So that gives you a much more workable set of values to work with, and then you can move on to actually. So as you can see here, that's virtually the end. I do have some tiny little things about the minutes here that I left, but that's actually it for the Tableau Prep. And once that's in Tableau Prep, you can leverage the fact that these empty times are in there to be able to actually show when there are courses that are, when there are rooms that are laying vacant at specific time periods. So for example here, and this is very valuable for interpretation for the registrar students and others, to be able to see that, oh, is it actually because of the inefficiencies in the schedule? People don't want to take courses, say Friday at 2 p.m. Or is it because we really lack space? And so those are the types of things that you can answer with that particular thing. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but that is pretty much it. And I usually call this like I call it like time skeleton or developing, tracking occupancy. So. Oh yeah, I was going to show my contact info here. So let me do that. Which I had in a single PowerPoint, which is right here. So you could just get in touch with me if you have any questions beyond this discussion.
Thanks, Govind. That was really interesting, and I think you've explained scaffolding there quite well. It's quite something that people are not necessarily aware of, and it's quite difficult to wrap your head around at first, but I think you did a good job. Does anyone have any questions on the presentation? Oh, I think there's one that's just gone in the chat.
Yes, it could show the room schedule by hour. It could even show by minute, ultimately. And like I said, I didn't show the minute, but it's just merging the hour and minutes together.
Great. And what would be your top Tableau Prep tip? You're clearly an experienced user.
Well, it's
got some big flows out there.
Yeah, I mean, Fraser really hit it correctly. Is that a lot of the stuff is, doing a lot of those renamings and things at the very end is very helpful. The one of the challenges is that in developing these extremely convoluted, lengthy size flows, similar to what Fraser showed, is that if you make a lot of those changes early on, figuring out where you have to track back, it does become difficult. On the other hand, there has to be a point where you have to create sort of this master place where there's a lot of calculations that could then spin off into other things and to aggregations and things like that. And so it really is, it gets a little bit overwhelming. And one of the other challenges, which we haven't quite resolved, is that sometimes we really need to be able to see how we want to be able to see all of the data first to be able to see if these joins are working, especially those joins like the greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, is how you want to see, oh, does that actually make sense intuitively? And then I want to go back and then do like a default sample. And sometimes it gets clogged up there depending on the size of the data set, but you just have to do the trick. And the documenting workflow, so this one was, I sort of set it up for doing presentation, so I don't have as much documentation, but there are notes in there. It isn't how I like it. I mean, this is also a thing with Tableau also, is that some of the documentation is tricky, because you could put as much documentation either in the comment fields of calculations or in the notes, but sometimes people want to just be able to access it in some other format. And it actually would be helpful if there's a way to, I know that there are some hacks where you can sort of export a piece of, at least with Tableau Desktop, a piece of a part of a component of, which is escaping me now, of the desktop file that has the XML behind the scenes, and then you could parse it into Python and things like that. But it would be nice to not have to be able to do that. Like, it would be nice to be able to document it. And so the documentation actually is a Word document that I try to update as much as possible. And I wish that there was a better way to update it. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who thinks that.
We do the same thing. Like, we write these big Word documents. Like, if we're doing like calculations that are like, you know, we're interpreting status codes into calculated fields, it ends up being like in a Word document. So, you know, non-prep users are able to like read that and know what we're doing.
Yeah, I put a lot of screenshots in those Word documents. And so it is nice. I mean, Microsoft Word is just a basic thing that everybody has. And you could just copy and paste screenshots from Tableau Prep into there. And so you have a central database. And then what's nice is that people could see it. And there's a colleague who uses Informatica, and they have it's obviously an ETL system, and so that's actually helpful to him, because you could just translate what I'm showing in a screenshot into an Informatica format, or even translate it into SQL if the need arises. But usually, a lot of the stuff I've actually, not so much with this one, but in other places, I've actually written the SQL and actually unwritten the SQL to get it into Tableau Prep. So, yeah.
Yeah. Someone's put a question in the Q&A saying, would there be a way to use Jupyter notebooks for documentation?
If you do know, please tell me how to do that, because I would love to be able to do that. That would
it's
be
not
my
something
answer.
I can say I've come across.
Yes. But if anyone knows, please send me an email on that.
Great. Well, if there's no more questions, then we can wrap things up. So thank you both of you once again for presenting two really good presentations. And I think what's been nice about this session is that we've had two individuals that are actually presenting how they use prep in their roles. Often with these, we might have the devs on to show new features or some tips and tricks, which are great. People learn a lot, but I think it's always really good to see how people are actually getting hands-on with prep in their day-to-day lives. If these two have inspired you to come and present, both of them just reached out through our Google form that we have, so that will be shared in, to be honest, I can share it now. Let me get it, but I'll drop the link in the chat. But also, if you're ever interested in presenting, we'd love to have you on. It would be great to see new speakers. We often have people come and present again. So, Fraser and Govind, if in the future you want to come back, you're more than welcome. Let me just get this short URL. I'm trying to sort of type and talk at the same time, which never really works. Everyone. There we go. So that form gives you the option to submit a topic idea. So you can either present that yourself, or if it's actually a suggestion you have that you don't want to present yourself, but you would like to see delivered at a user group, that would be great. But otherwise, thank you for coming this evening or this morning, depending on where you are, or this afternoon, all over. The next session will be, we try to do this every 2 months. So we're looking probably at end of August now. We do also rotate the time zones if you're new to the session today. So today, as I mentioned, is APAC and the Americas. The next session will be the US, the Americas, and Europe, or EMEA. And so APAC, you will be missing out. It's your turn to rest on the next session. But then we'll be back to EMEA and APAC in October. So yeah, look out for that newsletter. We will let you know when that Slack workspace is up and running. If you have any questions in the meantime, you can contact any of the leaders through the sort of prep user group page. But yeah, have a great rest of your days and see you soon.